tariffs. Before I turn things over to the Premier, I would ask everyone to ensure their microphones are placed on mute. Bonjour à tous et bienvenue à la mise à jour d'aujourd'hui concernant les tarifs pour les Nouveaux-Brunswickois et les Nouveaux-Brunswickoises. Avant de céder la parole à la Premier ministre, voulez-vous assurer de désactiver le son de vos micros? Premier.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone.
I thought that I was going to be coming here to say there's no new news on tariffs this week until yesterday when the President of the United States decided to add a 25% tariff to automobiles made outside of the U.S., which certainly impacts Canada. Alors, il y a des choses à discuter aujourd'hui, pas seulement ça.
So things to discuss today, not just that, but it starts with that. So the President will be applying 25% tariffs for cars fabricated outside the Nova Scotia. It may not outside the U.S. This will have an impact certainly on Ontario.
As a leader in manufacturing and exporting automobiles, and I think as David Campbell has said, when Ontario sneezes, New Brunswick gets a cold. They are our second largest provincial trading partner, and so when the Ontario economy is reduced or struggling, that have an impact here. Businesses in New Brunswick should be aware that if they are supplying into the automobile industry or affected by the impact that this is going to have on Ontario, our team's tariff relief package is available to you. So the programs that we put in place, and I'll describe them a little bit later, those exist to help businesses through this tariff war. And if the tariff war has now moved to automobiles and Ontario, then as that impacts New Brunswick businesses and workers, the programs are there to support you. The other one that I want to touch on that was the new tariff as of last week, but I want to provide some updated information on, is the Chinese tariff on seafood. I appreciate that there's been perspectives shared from New Brunswickers about what we should take off of Chinese tariffs, and those are being discussed with the federal government. There is a broader global reason for some of the choice of Chinese tariffs in relation both to the U.S. and others, mais le support est encore là. Alors pour...
But certainly there's still support for them in New Brunswick. It's especially our seafood industry. The federal government had announced the last week that there will be support for those that are impacted negatively by the Chinese tariffs.
Income supports to fishers and farmers impacted by the 25% Chinese tariffs on canola oil and seafood. And the provincial government's tariff relief package that includes funds to support the seafood sector through our Atlantic Fisheries Fund is also there available to support you through this period. And that's a DAF-led program of grants to help companies, big and small. So I know there are some small processors and fishers that think that this might not be for them, but you can be a small fisherman in New Brunswick, and if your customer base has just been impacted in China and that's impacting your price or your sales, then the Atlantic Fisheries Fund and the team at DAF is here to support you. La troisième chose que je vais parler, c'est...
The third thing I'll talk about is support for municipalities. I was with the teams, the municipalities teams yesterday.
Of mayors and councillors with the Union of Municipalities yesterday, talking about many things, including tariffs. And there are many municipalities concerned about the impact of tariffs on their communities. And not just border communities, but also communities that are wondering about the increased cost for them of purchasing products that may be on the import tariffs list. So we wanted to reassure those communities that within our tariff relief package, there are funds to support the companies, the municipalities, the organizations that see an impact to the tariffs, and that sits with RDC. And there's also a remission process. So if you're exposed to an import tariff that Canada has placed on a good that's critical for your municipality, because we're collecting those funds as Canada, you can have those funds remitted to you to cover the additional cost of that purchase. And the federal government has reassured us that that remissions process will be very timely. And if you reach out to our team here, we can help walk you through that process. Alors, je veux rassurer la municipalité qu'il y a des supports.
So I want to let the municipalities know that we have plans for them as well. So I just want to sum up quickly, because we talked about tariffs on cars and Chinese tariffs and for the municipalities.
$62 million five-part tariff relief package that started off with supports for workers, people who see their jobs or their hours impacted by tariffs, that there's supports through PEDAL to help you through any disruption in your employment. And then we have the programs to support businesses impacted by tariffs. And so there's a working capital program to help if your revenues are taking a hit because of a decrease in purchases, in this case because of the steel and aluminum tariffs and the cost that those will put on your business. There is also our competitiveness and trade diversification and productivity package. So the team at Opportunities New Brunswick is there to support you as you look to invest in your business to become more productive and as you look to reach some new markets all over the world. And we are seeing an increase in demand and interest from places like Japan and other countries. So it's a really great opportunity to get together with ONB and other New Brunswick businesses and take this opportunity to find some of those new markets and countries that really want to support Canada at a time like this and want some of the best products that are made in this country, which are made here in New Brunswick. The next piece of our plan is our interprovincial trade barriers work. So I continue to be engaged around the national table, particularly last Friday in Ottawa for another First Ministers meeting, talking about how New Brunswick is leading the way on labor mobility and how we have recognized that any Canadian credential earned in another province in Canada is going to be recognized here in New Brunswick, and that those people can get to work the first day that they arrive in our province, and that'll help our businesses and our economy move quickly because there's a lot of time spent in that wait and red tape and cost to get the person that you need on the job for the project that you're trying to deliver. There's also the work that we're doing with the other provinces in Atlantic Canada and with the rest of the country to take down the regulatory barriers that add cost and challenge to doing business in Canada. Alors, on continue ce travail. Je suis encore...
I'm encouraged by the fact that by comments that we've received from Quebec, Nova Scotia, and other provinces to limit the internal trade barriers between our provinces in order to improve access to new markets for New Brunswick, but access also to clients throughout Canada. Bon, j'ai fait les ouvrières, les barrières commerciales internes. Les derniers que je vais mentionner, the next one I will talk about are the...
I don't need to encourage you to do that because you have been doing it in spades, New Brunswick, and I want to say thank you for that. J'apprécie énormément chaque fois.
It's greatly appreciated every time I hear about a business here in New Brunswick that says that there are local purchases have been going way up because they're seeing more and more opportunities with local clients and throughout Canada. This makes a difference. Buy New Brunswick and Canadian products and really just stop buying American products like we've been doing here at the government. That makes a difference.
It's starting to be noticed in the U.S. that we have stopped going there. We have stopped our bookings there. We have stopped buying their products. And we've even stopped supplying some of our goods to them. And it's starting to destabilize and create rumblings from the United States. And so it's working. Keep doing it. Buy New Brunswick made, and thank you for that. The last piece I want to talk about is next week. We expect news from Washington on the tariffs on April 2nd. The best information I have right now, and I will say with a caveat that it changes every few days, as we saw yesterday, but we are optimistic that we will not be faced with a 25% tariff across our economy, but rather a tariff at a reduced rate on a reduced list of goods. What that reduced rate is, I can't say. I could guesstimate 10%, 15%, but less than 25%. What that reduced list of goods is, at this point we're looking at steel and aluminum and auto imports. We anticipate more things will be added, but it's some measure of progress that it will be less than 25% and less than all goods that come from Canada. Alors ça, c'est qu'est-ce qu'on imagine va venir.
So that's what we think is going to come, but that may change. We are optimistic because the work is they're working very hard. The Minister and Minister LeBlanc are working hard, and we are continuing our conversations with governors and senators and other people from who are business leaders in the United States, and little by little are seeing the impact of those tariffs on their state and their business. So we are cautiously optimistic as to what's coming on April 2nd, that it will not be the worst case scenario.
Toronto next Thursday, selling New Brunswick to people that want to invest in our province and our economy here. And because we expect the news to come out on Wednesday of next week, I'm going to be doing this weekly update next Wednesday. The time is not yet confirmed, sometime probably between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, depending on when we get the news from Washington. And then certainly Team Canada and the First Ministers are looking to get together quite quickly after we get the word from Washington to prepare what our response looks like and finalize what those actions, additional actions in terms of retaliatory tariffs, additional actions in terms of other impacts to the U.S. will be. So you won't see me here next Thursday, but plan for Wednesday afternoon. And as soon as we get news from Washington, we will be here with you to let you know how New Brunswick's response is changing and what else is happening. Je vais vous rassurer qu'on va être ici.
I assure you that we'll be here each week, but it will not be Thursday, it'll be Wednesday. And once we know what the reality will be for tariffs, at this time we think they will be reduced from 25% and on not as many products will be covered. And once we have the news, perhaps after a meeting, we'll try to meet as Team Canada, and we'll be here at that point to share all this with you.
With the automobile tariffs, you can access our tariff relief package. With the Chinese tariffs, you can access our tariff relief package. Municipalities who are seeing impacts can access our tariff relief package. The team here at GNB is ready to take your calls and make sure we have the flexible support to get you through this, and then keep buying New Brunswick made and buying local, and we will get through this storm and be stronger on the other side. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Premier.
Thank you.
We'll now proceed with questions from members of the media. We do have a limited time for questions, so each reporter will have a question and the quickest follow-up. You have the right to pose your question in the official language of your choice. Just to let you know, I will be alternating between members of the media who are present in this room and those online. Nous allons maintenant procéder aux questions des journalistes. Nous disposons d'un temps limité pour les questions. C'est pourquoi je vais alterner entre les organismes de presse. Chaque journaliste a un droit à une question et un suivi très rapide. Vous avez le droit de poser vos questions dans la langue officielle. John Chilbeck, Post Media.
As you know, the tariffs from China on seafood is in response to our 100% tariffs on electric vehicles they're producing. How firm are you with the rest of the provinces on supporting that tariff on electric vehicles from China? Could you give your thoughts on that and whether it should be reduced to encourage the Chinese to take off our tariffs on lobster and crab?
There's definitely a conversation happening both around the First Minister's table and then between the federal government and China about that. Part of the move to put 100% tariff on Chinese EVs was in partnership with the United States, because both of our countries see China as a bigger threat. And so there is concern that removing the tariff on Chinese vehicles will make our relationship and situation in negotiating with the U.S. worse. So we're weighing options and evaluating what can be done to diminish or eliminate the Chinese tariffs while still ensuring that our work to eliminate or reduce the U.S. tariffs is on the right track.
So just 1 year, but how do you feel about it?
Well, certainly I don't want to see a 25% tariff on seafood from China or from the United States, because seafood is a huge part of New Brunswick's economy and identity, and we don't want to make things more challenging for our businesses here in New Brunswick. And I think that there are EVs out there that folks can have access to from a number of other countries. But I think that we have to do these negotiations in parallel. Can we reduce or remove that EV tariff with China and still retain the outcome that we want on the tariffs with the U.S.? At the end of the day, the U.S. is a much bigger market for our seafood than the Chinese market is, so we have to weigh them out and understand, at the end of the day, I want the best access possible to the U.S. market with the lowest or zero tariffs there, and then reducing the tariffs in China is secondary. And so if we can make sure that we're doing the right moves in both of those places to eliminate both of those tariffs, that's why it's a negotiation both with China and the U.S.
Vicky Hogarth, CHCO, unmute your microphone and ask your question, please.
Thank you, Bruce. Premier Holt, I apologize for sounding like a bit of a record, but according to the mayor of Campobello, sports teams are no longer wanting to travel to the island through the U.S., which means students of the local school are not able to have the same educational experience as other New Brunswick students. I'm just wondering if there's any talk at this point in time about potentially funding the seasonal ferry to start earlier. It's still 3 months away from the start date.
Thanks for the question, Vicky. And you don't sound like a broken record at all. Interestingly, the mayor of Campobello and others aren't the only ones looking at sports travel to and through the U.S. We had students from Harborview High that were in the legislature the other day expressing some of their own concerns about tournaments on the other side of the border and whether those were trips that they should be making or how they would be received on the other side. And the conversations about a seasonal ferry and the timing of the seasonal ferry, those have been looped in with the longer-term conversation about what the permanent solution is for Campobello, as well as the shorter-term conversation about how do we support the island with exemptions and what's happening for residents of Campobello at the border. So we do not want to see, those students are already, like yesterday and a year ago, the last time I was on Campobello, I had teachers and parents expressing to me the frustration that it's always them that travels to the mainland for tournaments and sporting activities, and it's practically never other teams that are coming to Campobello to compete, and it's not equitable. And so there's a challenge there that needs to be addressed, and having sort of ferry access to get to Deer Island and to get over to the mainland is one piece of it, and making sure that New Brunswickers know that thankfully we're watching the borders. The volumes are much, much lower of New Brunswickers going into the U.S., but we are watching carefully the treatment of New Brunswickers as they pass through the U.S., whether it's for sports events or otherwise, to make sure that people are safe and that they're being looked after by us and by our friends in Maine.
Ms. Hogarth, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Bruce. On that note of exemptions, how has the federal election complicated any attempts to get exemptions for islanders on the tariffs they pay on just basic needs?
Yeah, it has, in that we've been pushing with the federal government and have been in conversations with them practically daily about getting those exemptions carved out. And of course now we're being told it's caretaker mode, but that hasn't stopped the team at IGA from engaging. There's been proposed solutions that are a little softer, that we would prefer to see an exemption put in place than just be reassured that the border agents are being very flexible and are treating people in a friendly way. That's not something you can take to the bank. We want to see an exemption put in place. So we haven't had success with the federal government yet to get that yes or get that enacted, but we haven't stopped pushing them to do it.
Thank you very much. Sky from Global, unmute your microphone and please ask your question.
Oh, yes. I was wondering what your biggest concern is today when it comes to the auto tariffs and New Brunswick.
Thanks for the question, Sky. There are a number of New Brunswick businesses that do a lot of business in Ontario, either through supplying goods or services to the auto sector and with different partnerships. So as that large sector in the U.S., in Canada, and in Ontario takes a hit like this, it's going to have an impact on the New Brunswick companies that sell and supply to the Ontario auto industry. So my worry is that we're going to see a reduction in sales and demand for New Brunswick businesses.
A quick follow-up, Sky?
Yes, I have another follow-up, and it's just switching gears here on behalf of a colleague. The question, last week you said public health denied your request to investigate the mystery illness The Chief Medical Officer of Health now says he's not aware of that request, and just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I appreciate the question because the mystery illness is a situation that I've been talking about and wanting us to act on since before I got elected as premier. And so I think engaging public health and having all of the conversations that we have had with them through December and all through this year. I think some of you may have been here for Dr. Leger's update this morning on the work that we're doing and Public Health Canada is doing on this. I think there's maybe some misunderstandings around language and meetings and notes. It's something that I am learning more about. I asked the Prime Minister when he was here in November, both for the funding to support the work, and I think we talked about that in this very room, to get the support of Public Health Canada and CAHR on the work that we're doing for the patients who are struggling with this mysterious illness. The bottom line is it needs to move faster. We need all hands on deck. We appreciate that Public Health Canada is here and on the ground and doing the work now, and we're trying to use every resource possible to get that work done as quickly as possible so that patients can get the information that they desperately need to understand what's going on. And so I'm pleased that Public Health Canada is on board with us. A leadership role or a partnership role, I think, is getting into some of the semantics of it, but they're being very helpful and we're doing the work together, and there has been a lot of conversations to get to the point where we're at now, and thankfully a very clear plan of investigation and work being done on the cases and with the data as of the last number of, I think we're going 3 or 4 weeks now that they've been hands-on with the patient's information, getting the work done that we need to finally get the information that patients deserve.
Thank you. Alex Villeneuve, Radio-Canada.
Oui.
Yes. Okay, concerning the neurological diseases, if Public Health Canada and New Brunswick finally find a link between the neurological illnesses and strong doses of glyphosate, will you be passing a law to regulate the levels used? Well, certainly if we wait for their work, if we will be waiting for information that we will react in the responsible way to the information that's given to us. I don't want to prejudge the results of an inquiry or of an investigation. The most important thing is to do the work in an independent way, a reliable way, with communications to see what is it exactly and what is causing that illness, and then we will be able to attack the cause to eliminate or reduce the possibility that other New Brunswickers might get it. But also, I want to ask you, will you be following the recommendations? You seem to say yes, but I'd like to know this new step in the investigation. Is your government asked for that, or was it an initiative of public health? The new step. Okay. Was it at the request of your government? From our government. Yes, our government, which is pushing for that investigation, asked it for the Department of Health and for Public Health to do that investigation. And we've asked to find resources with the federal government, with CIHR, Public Health Canada, use all the possible resources to lead an investigation as quickly as possible, because patients are waiting and waiting and waiting, and they've been waiting for too long. They're frustrated. I'm frustrated as well that things aren't going as quickly as I'd like to see it go, and it's not going as fast as they'd like either. But we have an investigation plan. The work is being done. It's been done over many weeks, even months now, and there will be data coming out. There's a schedule set up, and there's a communications person who will be there for people who were waiting for details for way too long.
Good afternoon, Premier, and thank you for taking the time. You talked about the automotive industry and the new tariffs on them, and talked about the relief funding that's available for them. How quickly can those industries access that money?
Immediately. So we had built this tariff response plan to be ready for what we thought were going to be tariffs that were going to come a month ago. And there has been some impact just to the steel and aluminum tariffs as is. And so the programs are ready for companies to pick up the phone and reach out to Opportunities New Brunswick and say, this is what's happening in my business. I just lost the contract to supply to an Ontario auto manufacturing. It's going to hurt our business by this much revenue. And can you help us with some working capital? Or can you help us go and find a new customer to replace within the European automobile market? So it's there, it's ready today, and the team at Opportunities New Brunswick is exceptionally responsive. They're ready to hear from businesses impacted and craft the right solution to support them through this.
Overall, when it comes to tariff relief for many industries in this province, does the province have enough?
That's a great question, right? How much is enough when we have been operating on forecasts that are built on what the president said yesterday? And so we built models at 25% across the whole economy. We have looked at impact of steel and impact of auto manufacturing. We hear that next week it might be less and on less goods. And so we've built a package right now that we believe we can afford responsibly and that responds to the impact that our economy may take. But as those impacts shift, as we see how it's going to hurt New Brunswick businesses, if the tariffs are put in place or when and at what level, then we will build the response necessary. We've got to support our workers. We've got to support our entrepreneurs. We've got to protect our economy and make sure that we are preserving and securing the economy of New Brunswick. We have to do that in a way that we can afford, that doesn't dig us into a hole that we can't get out of in the long term. So it is a balancing act. We believe right now we have a package that is sized appropriately to the threat, but as the threat becomes more clear, we will adjust our supports.
Thank you. Sam Farley, CBC, can you unmute your microphone and ask your questions, please?
Good afternoon, Premier. I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more a point you made earlier about how municipalities are able to get some of that tariff funding back from the federal government. Is this a specific deal that you've gotten just for New Brunswick, or is this something that they're making available across the country?
Thanks for the question, Sam. So there's two pieces to the tariff supports that I think the municipalities can take advantage of if they see impacts in their community. So we have a fund with RDC, and that's to help municipalities who have seen whether it's border-related activity drop or businesses in their communities have been affected, and that's come to the municipality. But specifically the piece related to the remissions of the tariffs Canada is collecting, that's a national and a federal program. So as import tariffs are collected on that list of $30 billion of goods that Canada published, those funds are collected by the federal government and held, ready to be remitted to people who paid them. So as a municipality has to make a purchase of an item off the import retaliatory tariff list, then they can make the purchase, see the added cost, and apply to the federal government to have that cost remitted to them through the process that exists for everyone in Canada. But it was municipalities who flagged to us that they had some procurement from the U.S. that they were concerned was going to be exposed to tariffs. And so I wanted to make sure people were clear that there is a remissions process there, that not just municipalities, but any company that finds themselves hit with a retaliatory tariff can apply to get reimbursed.
A quick follow, Sam.
Thank you. And you mentioned you're speaking with business leaders in the U.S. I'm curious too, if you've been speaking with governors, politicians, if you get any sense that any of these governors or politicians, maybe from our neighboring states in New England, are actually taking any efforts or standing up, on our behalf.
Yeah, we are seeing a bit of it, particularly from our closest neighbors, and we are hearing more and more that senators and governors, particularly in Republican states, are starting to see the impact and are starting to understand better how this is hurting Americans with the steel tariffs and aluminum tariffs that are in place and with the retaliatory actions that we've taken with the ceasing of procurement from U.S. companies that the New Brunswick government and other provinces have undertaken. We've heard it from whether it's Jack Daniels or others that it bothers them that their products have no visibility or sale in Canada. So it's little by little. I will say that New Brunswick is the host of something called the Southeastern U.S. States and Canadian Premiers Conference that happens regularly and rotates between Southeastern states and Canada. And that's being hosted in St. John, the place in our province that is the most impacted by the tariffs early in June. And that is not only governors and politicians from the southeastern U.S. that are coming to connect with us as Canadian premiers, but it's also businesses from those states connecting with businesses in New Brunswick that are exporters. And so we've got our eye on using that CP, as we call it, conference in St. John in June as another piece in our efforts to convince the southeastern U.S. And their leaders of how harmful this is to both the American and Canadian economy, and raise their voices louder and louder to the White House.
Thank you. Alexander Johnson, All New Brunswick.
Good afternoon, Premier. Oh, good afternoon.
Good
Premier.
afternoon. Hi, Alexander.
My audio is working now. I wanted to ask, when it comes to the various tariff aid programs, are you able to give us an idea of how much has been distributed at this point?
Oh, through our support programs? I don't have that figure actually, but I can certainly ask and come back to you to see what between DAF and ONB and PEDAL and RDC, what has been dispersed.
Do you have a quick follow-up, Mr. Johnson?
Yes, as a follow-up, with what you're mentioning about how we may see next week a reduced list of products that are seeing tariffs in that, how concerned are you that, when this was a broad across the economy tariff, 25%, that obviously would have a lot of effect on the U.S. economy as well. How concerned are you that this is now a more targeted approach, the kind of which the U.S. might decide to sustain and retrench for years to come?
Yeah, that's a great question, really insightful, because it's one thing to fight back against something that is broad and that will really impact the U.S. as well. If they start to niche down into the things that will have the least amount of impact in the U.S. And at a lower level that everyone might just learn to live with, that is concerning. I mean, we've been living with softwood lumber tariffs for quite some time, although if they are on this list and get more tariffs on top of the other ones, then it will render the sector extremely uncompetitive and very challenging. And we've always been worried about them breaking it up into sectors and either pinning one sector against the other or one region against the other, because we know that we have a lot of influence in things like energy and minerals and critical exports like petroleum and others, that they need to grow their economy. If they carve all of those things out and just focus on the least damaging to them, that may be harder for Canada to shrug off or to negotiate away. So there's pros and cons, and thankfully we have some very skilled people at the table who will be working on what the right response from Canada is to make sure that ultimately we eliminate tariffs from the U.S. on the Canadian economy.
Thank you both. We're slowly running out of time. So Sheldon from Maritime Broadcast, quick question.
Thank you. Premier, you had floated an idea of an Atlantic bubble for free trade. Nova Scotia's Premier seemed a bit cool to that, instead suggesting he would be more focused on a national level. And in fact, Mark Carney said he'd like to see all interprovincial trade barriers come down by Canada Day. Your thoughts on prioritizing one over the other?
Oh, I think we all want to see interprovincial trade barriers come down, but Canada Day on July 2nd, I had a hunch that we in the Maritimes and in Atlantic Canada could move more quickly, and actually the Premier of Nova Scotia is the one that's pretty most on board, along with PEI and New Brunswick, because they had already put in place the notion of a reciprocal agreement. We thought, let's just do it all together as an Atlantic zone, and actually New Brunswick has taken steps to remove our barriers independently and to put forward the most aggressive labor mobility program that removes all barriers to labor from other parts of Canada to work in New Brunswick. So I thought that we could get the jump and maybe move a little more quickly, and maybe a little bit of the cynic that was in me that was thinking, is this really going to happen by Canada Day? And do I think all these other provinces are going to get on board? At least we in Atlantic can do something meaningful here. But the ultimate goal is to reduce interprovincial trade barriers nationally. We all want to see on Canada Day that we're celebrating a serious reduction or complete removal of barriers to do business across this country.
Sheldon, the quickest follow-up.
The quickest follow-up. Back to the issue about the undiagnosed neurological disease. Dr. Leger suggested that this next analysis, isn't necessarily looking for the cause. I'm wondering, when does that happen? When will government focus on finding the cause of that?
Well, the first step is to find out what the problem is. So it's looking at these, I think it's 222 maybe, patients that we have data on right now that's being analyzed. I think that number could grow because we're told there's more patient data to come, and understanding what is it? And then once we have a clear sense of who's experiencing what impacts and where, then that can help drive the what's causing it conversation. And that's the piece that gets us access to some of the funding for research that we are being told we're not eligible for when we're in the analysis and investigation stage of the patient data. So getting a clear picture of what the patients have experienced and what they have is what's then going to lead us to the environmental factors and the external research of the causes. So it's you have to put the chicken before the egg. Is that how I would say it? So we've got to really look at the patient data to understand the commonalities between what these hundreds of patients are experiencing to inform the most appropriate external and environmental research.
Alison McCormick, CBC, very quick one, please.
Hi, good afternoon. I just have a question along the same lines as Vicky Hogarth about Campbell Island. I was there this week, and residents there are feeling particularly isolated given the tariffs and their dependency on shopping in Maine for necessities. They're looking for a year-round ferry, as Vicky mentioned, but also a subsidized ferry because, as you know, the cost of hopping on the ferry is $25 per person and their car each way, so $50 round trip, and they say that's really, not very feasible for people who are on a fixed income. And I think there are 9 other provincially run ferries. What are your thoughts on this? Would that be an option to not only return or not only provide a year-round ferry, but also a subsidized one?
Thanks for the question, Allison. I appreciate that point, actually, because the conversation about the Campobello Ferry has been certainly ongoing with the residents. I've been a bit dismayed that there isn't more information on the government side of things that have been looked into over the last 6 years in terms of the solutions that I've heard islanders present and lots of different options about how we could do this, conversations about the cost of the ferry, the contract of the current ferry, and what residents have to pay for it. I think the last time I was there, I had a little punch card to use, and Minister Kennedy was actually just there last week meeting with residents and meeting with the mayor to talk about this. So I appreciate that suggestion, the notion of the cost of the ferry right now and the alternative being to go through the U.S. in the midst of a tariff war. I think that's worthy of consideration at this point in time.
Ms. McCormick, a quick follow-up.
Nope, that's fine, thanks.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
ladies
Allison.
and gentlemen. That concludes today's update. Thank you. Voilà la fin de notre mise à jour. Merci beaucoup.
Merci tout le monde. Well, Alan, Williwan, thank you.